The COVID-19 vaccine is always free of cost. You can visit pharmacies, community health centers, and other health providers in your neighborhood.
And now for the lightning round.
Did you know? The Delta variant of COVID is a mutation that has health experts worried because it's twice as contagious.
Then for our finale.
Did you know? The best way to protect yourself from the COVID Delta variant is to get fully vaccinated. Get your vaccine today.
Find out more at kingcounty.gov/vaccine.
Did you know?
Generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We asked our communities.
And this is what they had to say.
Generational wealth to me is setting up a safety net for the future, not only for yourself, but for the generations to come. To not have the future generations, maybe in your own family, to have to go through the same trials that you had to go through. Maybe if you went through something hard when you were younger, maybe being poor, being middle class, or not having the money to have access to the things that other people around you do. It's setting up that safety net so that not only you, maybe later in your life, but also your kids, their kids, can end up having the luxuries that you would have wanted when you were young.
This campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhood's Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Create your generational wealth for you and the future of your families.
Hello, listener. What's important to you about what's going on in your community? Are you interested? Are you concerned? In any case, I invite you to tune into my show, Seattle Here and Now, on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Why? I will be covering a wide range of topics important to you and impacting the community. Each show will have a special guest or guests to share with you information on a variety of subjects that are happening here and now in Seattle. I promise I will work hard to make my show informative, interesting, and entertaining. Be sure to listen to Seattle Here and Now on Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We asked our communities.
And this is what they had to
You
say.
see lots of people who've gotten rich quickly and gotten poor just as quickly and left nothing to their families and or the community. That's a big chunk of the piece that needs to change. We need to see people making their investment in their families and in themselves and in the community. We want to build all three of those elements. We want to establish long-lasting family and community wealth, not just people who've gotten rich and squandered it. Those who have wealth will be opposed to our breaking the status quo. So this will be a struggle. All those folks are used to how things have been for hundreds of years, and that's the piece that needs to change. And they need to be able to stand by.
This campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhood's Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not translating the lyrics of Boogie Oogie Oogie for bored Europeans, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Rainier Avenue Radio, live from Seattle Columbia City Theater. I'm Sam Harris, housing economist and co-founder of SeeKing Change, a collective examining the homeless situation in the greater Seattle and King County region. Each week, we'll explore an issue at the heart of the problem, find the root causes of homelessness. At the end of this 12 weeks, we'll present a unified solution. Previously, we spoke with one of our frontline case managers and executive director of Anything Helps, Mike Mathias. We explored housing first concepts and dove into the hardships of housing loss, sweeps, and the inefficiencies of our shelter system. We are honored to have him back with us today to dive a little deeper into supportive housing resources and the various programs available to support housing stability. Great to have you back, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's talk about narrative. What are we missing here?
Well, it's not so much what you're missing as what you're being fed. So, yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges with uniting on an issue like homelessness for our citizenry is just the propaganda that we get told by nonprofits that are well intended, but they feel like they need to tell you that they're doing great work to get donations, or the government that wants to have their officials reelected and really want to showcase their their progress on the issue. This is the number one issue in any political discourse in this city. And so
everybody wants to look good.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And so you have this need to present progress when, as we know, as of right now, like we've seen a 25% increase in homelessness this year.
Yeah, that point in time count came out to be 16,000.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not certain how accurate that is. That's one of the things that I was just discussing earlier today with one of the COC board members, where how many people volunteer to do the count might actually influence how many people are found.
No.
So it's an interesting number. We see a 25% rise, and I guess on the streets does feel that way. It does feel bigger.
And that's part of the problem. So when you have a government or a official narrative from people that are being paid to solve the issue, that they are solving the issue, and then you have the public encounter more and more of the issue, then what that implies is that people are outside by choice, and that there are solutions for them and they don't want to use them. But that is not the case at all. The majority of our funding for homelessness goes into staffing, right? It's like 60-70% of what we spend goes to people getting paid to address the issue.
Not enough, by the way.
Which is not enough.
Yeah.
So,
No, I mean, but people are getting paid, but it's below the poverty line. Right?
Yeah, and that's one of the fundamental issues, is that we can't say that we're making progress on an issue while simultaneously having the public run into more and more of the issue, because the truth is, we're not solving the issue. We're not addressing the issue. What they're experiencing is the truth. What they're being told is not simultaneously the truth. And therefore, if we believe that homelessness is a choice, and we believe both of these, paradoxes, then what we put the blame on is the people that are experiencing the problem, which is, just victim blaming. And that is fuel for criminalization. That's fuel for camping bans. That's, I think that one of the biggest problems with our sector as a provider that I see is that we just assume that people that want to criminalize homelessness or want to ban people from sleeping in public are just bad people. And that's not true at all. When you believe that homelessness is a choice, but you also believe that, the living conditions that people are experiencing when they're outside, and the lifespan reduction, which is like an average of 20% less than the average citizen, is a bad thing, and you believe that people are choosing that, then you take their choice away to save their lives. And so when you see it that way, you don't see bad people trying to arrest, innocent people. You see people trying to save lives. And I think we really need to be more compassionate with each other about what we're trying to say, because, nobody's inherently trying to be malicious here.
Yeah, you get the feeling that, nobody wants homelessness. And certainly when people are housed and they're losing their housing, they're clinging as tightly as they can to housing.
Yeah.
I found that there's kind of this resource depletion spiral that occurs where you lose that first housing stability resource, like a utility bill. Like United Way, they were saying that the first thing that usually is requested is help with the utility bill. Heat, and a few years back, there were the people in Chicago that froze to death because they didn't have heat. And you just look at that and say, wait, we have resource providers that actually already do that. But it just feels like they're very difficult to connect to. So, let's talk for a minute about supportive housing and the wraparound services that are available. What are they, and do they work? How do we measure success?
Yeah. So, so this is going to get back into the whole, what we've been discussing before, is like, what is supportive housing services? What are these things? Because so many of us think differently. Like, I always see us using these terms as if we're throwing them back and forth and they're like pieces of clay. And every time that I throw it at you, it changes shape, right? And you have a different understanding of what I intended. And then you're going to throw it back at me and I'm going to have no idea what's going on.
Yeah,
So
with my big old handprint on it.
so we have to really define supportive housing services and really understand what that means. And I think that there's two different understandings of what that means out there.
Okay.
The first one
Let's
is,
start there.
supportive housing can mean a building with supportive services on site. That is not evidence-based at all. That is the primary thing we use to address homelessness, but that is not evidence-based at all. And it also runs into, people that justifiably don't want, a concentration of people that are experiencing really difficult issues in their lives as neighbors. I think one of the big challenges that we have today is getting rid of that supportive housing mentality, that definition, and giving people opportunities within normal, healthy communities, like other neighborhood areas, to kind of like surround themselves in healthier social norms that keep these maladaptive social norms that we see all the time from concentrating and becoming normalized for people, because those are not conducive environments for people's recovery. I mean, people talk about it all the time that we work with. They say that when they get into one of those units in one of those buildings, it feels great when they're in their apartment, but as soon as they leave, they feel like they're right back in the encampment as soon as they enter the hallway. And that's exactly what we're creating. So I think NIMBYs have a good point in that, first of all, what we're trying to do is not evidence-based. So
what should we do?
What we should do is the other form of supportive housing services, which is
the pathways.
Yeah.
Right, by Sam.
It's not even just pathways. I mean, permanent supportive housing is also an evidence-based practice. And what it tells you is that if you provide client choice and you provide people with a pathway to what they want in terms of housing, at least choices in housing, and you provide them with supportive services that follow them into that community and check in with them at their door, you're going to have much better luck than putting services in the building, because that creates this mentality of enforcement, or it draws this line between supportive housing services and the housing property manager, and then the landlord becomes the service provider in people's eyes, and you don't want to approach it if you're having problems. And that's the opposite of what we want to create in terms of the perspective.
Right. Landlords are particularly sensitive because they, number one, they don't want evictions. I mean, nobody doesn't want homelessness more than landlords.
Yeah.
Right. They want stable people paying their rent.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about services following the applicant.
Yeah.
When you're talking about like rent support and all of these different programs that exist, when you find them and they happen to be operated by other entities, I mean, how are we able to work together right now?
We're not.
Okay.
We brand our clients like cattle, and we don't like other people messing with them. We get territorial and possessive, and we're like, this is my client. And it's just like, what are you doing, man? You don't have all the solutions that they need. And so we have a real challenge with intersectionality when it comes to homelessness. We don't work with the healthcare sector. We don't work with the mental health system. We don't work with, the housing system very well, even though it's the homelessness sector. It's bizarre how we think that we're just going to go out. It's almost like white saviorism, like we're just like, we got this. It's just like, no, you don't. Like, when we talk about how, the workforce is underfunded, or that we have all of these other issues with, turnover and burnout, things like that. That's because we're not utilizing the resources in the community around us. We're not networking, we're not collaborating. And it's mind-blowing to me that we don't recognize the need for more intersectionality around the issue. But that's where we are. I mean, our authorities do not want to do anything about that. Yeah. And that's the status quo.
And is that lack of collaboration, the intersectionality, where everybody can be working together on a client, is that really derived from the way that we fund our programs?
Yeah, 100%, because we're competitive in terms of our grant seeking, in terms of our funding, in terms of the opportunities. We don't want to disclose those opportunities to each other. We're worried. And the thing is, it's not malicious. It's because we are so siloed that we rely on that money to maintain our workforce. So like, you have this justification that like, I won't be able to keep my employees paid if I don't, protect my funding. But in reality, if we were just more intentional about how we spent money, we may realize that we can accomplish the things that we can accomplish today with half the workforce, because we're sharing our resources.
Yeah, that's one of the amazing programs out here, United Way.
Mhm.
Everybody knows them, but not everybody knows all their services, and they have basically a mutual fund of services. They kind of do everything because they're kind of a silo, and so they have to do everything. So they fund all these different programs so that they have everything in-house, and people can get in touch with them using 211.
Mhm.
But
In theory.
yeah, in theory. But the problem is they're so backed up, and some of their programs are less effective than others. Some of their programs are amazing, but it feels like they could be so much better off if they outsourced some of those programs to programs that are specialized in these different aspects of stabilization. And it's that whole collaborative momentum that you gain, where it's like that person is helping with this problem, because people come in with such a variety of vulnerabilities, and it does take different perspectives.
Yeah, it's the allegory of the blind man and the elephant is what I think of every time, which is like, if you've got 9 blind men touching an elephant in different places, it's going to feel like a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Right. And only when you, share those perspectives and you highlight, the whole picture, can you really understand what that is actually. You can think it's a rope if you're touching the trunk. You can think it's stone if you're touching the horn. We're all wrong. All of us are, unless we work together and we have a more coordinated and, accepting of other perspectives type of mentality, which we don't have in the sector at all.
Yeah. It makes us very proprietary
about
what we do. And then you go to these meetings. Everybody goes to the meetings. There's so many meetings, and they all share what they want to share. They give their little spin. Our program is so amazing.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily share the drawbacks. They don't share the things that they're not as good at.
Well, they will if they're providers, but they won't do that to their donors.
Well, right. Yeah, that's a good point. The donors, they just spin it, right? So it sounds as good as possible, so they can get as much funding as possible. And they, of course, what they do, the reporting that they do for the authorities.
They'll get what they want. Yeah, they'll get all happy flowers and rainbows. Yeah.
Right.
But the reality is, like, none of us are doing well, and we all contribute to the problem. You, me, all of us. We're all contributing to the problem in some way, and we have to be willing to change those things as a collective in order to make the changes that we want. Otherwise, we're not going to see it at all. There's a common phrase in systems thinking that is, if you cannot recognize how you are part of the problem, you cannot be part of the solution. And it's absolutely 100% true.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about this program that you have connected to, FCS. Tell us a little bit about it and the opportunities it presents.
Sure. Well, FCS is Foundational Community Supports, and it's a healthcare authority regulated program that allows, it's kind of at the forefront of the intersectionality that we were talking about between housing and healthcare. So it is a flexible program. That's why we signed up for it as an organization. And it really is, it's really on the cutting edge of where we want to be with services. It's a per service program, and you get to kind of advocate for real solutions that are client driven for your clients. And it's really flexible in terms of how you can support, but it's also very fidelity driven. So it follows a very particular service model.
Okay,
And
let's talk for a minute about what that means, fidelity.
sure, yeah.
And is it the measure of success?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. This is perfect. Let's talk about what is the measure of success.
So I think we've talked about this before, but like the fidelity of a service model is what gives you evidence-based outcomes. So you can't guarantee that the direction you're taking a client or a direction you're taking, a program is going to produce good outcomes unless you follow the evidence base of, the fidelity of a service model, which is how, we can replicate and scale and, peer review and scrutinize models and still come out on the other hand with good outcomes.
Okay.
They're all factors that play into what needs to be in place to be effective.
Okay, so the big question is, what does the evidence tell us? What's the best situation, right? You were talking about earlier how difficult it is to have shelter. Like shelters are temporary. They sometimes have a revolving door where people go into the shelter and then they go out of the shelter and they back and forth. And any progress they take is gone when they lose their shelter space again. And some of those are really tricky. You have to be there every day at a certain time to maintain it, and you don't really get to leave your stuff behind. A lot of them don't have a locked door. And I think there's a lot of value to a locked door. It gives you certain security when you're sleeping even. I've heard a lot about congregate shelters where people are insecure living there and choose not to. And so I know you've talked a little bit about skipping that and going straight to permanent housing.
Yep.
How do we do that?
You do that through community-based interdisciplinary support that follows you instead of is aligned to a specific place. So we're talking about ensuring that like shelters are not evidence-based. There's no evidence base that shows that shelters work. There's no evidence base that shows that shelters are even necessary. And when you look at encampments, they're essentially a group of people attempting to shelter in place. So you already have that in our society today. So there's no need to spend all this money and all this staffing and all this infrastructure on temporary places that people don't want to go in the first place. What are we doing? Like that money could be spent in all kinds of different ways, mainly on subsidies to get people into regular units. But that's not enough. You can't just, get people into housing and call it a day. And that's what we do today.
Right. There's a lot of requirements for housing stability. You have to be able to pay the utilities and all of the things that go into it. You have to have the income.
But even if you take care of all of that, you still can't just leave somebody to be. Like they need to be integrated into the community, and that takes time, and that takes support, and that takes, for varying degrees of people, that's going to take a lot of treatment, a lot of care, a lot of options, a lot of investment in our time. And we can't do that while simultaneously investing in shelters. It's not possible. We don't have enough money.
Right. So the support that's required is probably exacerbated by housing loss and the trauma you experience. So you have another program called tenancy support, which I'm assuming is a preventative measure to keep people from losing their housing. Now, what does the evidence say about this?
I'm not sure. Right. I don't know as a standalone intervention what that does show, to be honest with you. I'll look into it because that's a good idea. But we do tenancy support as part of our streets to housing, continuum as an organization. And we do that because we want to set people up for success. So we set up, we open bank accounts for people. We set up automatic deposits for people. We set up all the things that we commonly see that accumulate as tenancy issues over time that lead to eviction. We set them up where they don't even have to think about those things. Those aren't burdens on them. They're not, piling up on them and the landlord. The these things are all taken care of. And then we can start focusing on, hey, how do we make your house a home? How do we make you feel invested in this so you don't want to lose it? How do we work on traffic issues, and people coming in and out of your unit all the time? How do we work on building boundaries with you? How do we work on getting you into treatment? How do we work on getting you ready for treatment? These are all things that we need to, really be invested and engaged with people on until they feel safe enough to and comfortable enough to like reach out to us when they're ready.
So you're saying people who are on, they're addicted to some form of drug, should just go straight into housing stability situations, and that will reduce the desperation that is being filled by the drug.
It will definitely help, but it won't solve the problem. So yes, I am saying that, but you need to have weekly check-ins with that person. You need to be available to that person. You need to have a relationship with that person, that they're seeing you every week, or a member of your team. And so, because 83% of people that we serve over the course of 6 months will come up to us at some point, if we're doing our jobs right, and say, I want to go to treatment. And that's over the course of 6 months. So like, we need to have those options available when they're ready, and we need to be around when they are ready for that to work out.
Sounds like we need to rebuild trust.
Yeah.
Well, that is beautiful. Well, thank you again. And that's it for Seeking Change this week. I'm Sam Harris. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for Seattle Here and Now. What's that? Oh, we're getting bonus time. All right. I got more questions. Excellent. All right. Well, good. Okay. So let's just jump in real quick to the other end of this spectrum, how you're including more caseworkers into your program to get additional wages.
Yeah.
This is an important thing out there because caseworkers don't make a lot of money.
Yep.
Do you happen to have a figure on how much caseworkers make?
Statewide, the average is about $36,000 a year.
30, so they're basically at risk of housing loss.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. So the people helping people at risk have a very good perspective because they are too at risk.
Yes.
Huh. Fascinating.
And what we do with our program is to contract with individuals that are in that sector, that have organizations that are willing to cover them for liability outside. It's called moonlighting. I don't know if you've heard the term, but like, a lot of organizations will allow their full-timers to moonlight. And if they're willing to allow their workers to moonlight, we're able to provide them a supplementary wage for providing tenancy support in their zip codes in their neighborhoods, which is a really cool opportunity to really ensure that people are taken care of and earning a self-sufficient wage.
Sweet. Yeah, that is fantastic. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking over at the producer here. We got 2 minutes. All right. Okay. So if you have the police that just got this huge bump in pay, $20,000.
Is that really how much they got?
Yeah.
Wow.
According to the Seattle Times. And you have them on the front line, right? They're experiencing the crisis of housing instability as the symptom that they see is the desperation, right? People clinging to housing stability for all that they can. And yet they're not a part of our industry. They are part of our industry. I mean,
we're
whether
all
we
part
like
of
it
the
or
industry.
not, right?
All of us are.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're front line, right? They're the first responders to housing instability. And we have kind of removed that support of the ability to serve, to protect and serve, that good cop, bad cop. And it's a fascinating experience for the police because they really don't have the power to help. And I'm wondering if they had the ability to connect you to that person in that moment, could your program actually help them?
Probably not.
No?
Because they'll be too volatile. The police do something to people. Like it's not easy to engage with people when they're dealing with law enforcement.
Yeah.
In fact, we try to avoid interacting with law enforcement as much as we can in front of other people, because it'll just make them volatile and problematic.
Yeah. The stigma of law enforcement is
Yeah.
hard to get over.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. Now we are officially out of time. Now stay tuned for Seattle Here and Now. Thanks so much.
Appreciate that.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.org.